Need a better way to understand and maintain legacy mainframe applications? This is Joe Gullo with PathPoint Software, and I want to talk to you about the nature of these challenges and how we address them. Let's look at a typical situation. Let's assume that you and I are mainframe application developers who just got assigned to support a 30-year-old mainframe order processing app. We might be new mainframe application developers who have spent some years in development, but in either case, we don't know anything about this particular application. There are just a few application developers still supporting this app, but they will be retiring soon, and management is counting on us to come up to speed quickly. And there is already a change request in the queue to add a new function to the order entry process. So where to start? What do we have to work with? First, let's find out what resources we have to use. This CICS online order processing application system was written back in the late 70s and early 80s, mainly in COBOL. The documentation does not appear to have been updated much since then, so it'll be of limited value to us. Looking in the partition dataset that has all the program source code, we find that this app has 460 COBOL programs. The application appears to have over 140 files, mostly DB2 tables and some vsam files. What details can we find about the application? Now let's find out as much about the application as we can. Let's talk with the current developers, understanding that they can only spare a few hours with us because they already have more work than they can handle. The documentation is of little help, but we can look at the data definitions of the files, the DB2 tables and vsam copybooks, and get a pretty good idea of what data is used by this app. This will give us the data view. But the biggest challenge now is to figure out how the programs process and update the data in these files to provide all the business functionality in this app. If we had this, we would have the process view. What process views are needed to support this app? Let's first look at how apps are typically organized. Well, we know that all apps were written to provide specific business functionality for users of the application. Looking at the user's guide for our order processing application, there are 9 major business functions that this application provides. For example, order processing, inventory control, customer claims, and returns. Each major application business function, like order processing, for example, is broken down into specific business transactions that users can enter, like order entry, customer search, and backorder inquiry. Together, these business transactions provide all the business functionality for this major business function called order processing. So for each major application business function, we need to determine how programs process data and update these files for each of its business transactions. But specifically at the moment, our focus is the order entry business transaction, since this is related to our change request. How will we determine the process view for the order entry business transaction? Before we can answer this question, we first need to review some basics. When we look at how any online business transaction is entered, we find that users typically enter data in increments on multiple screens. These multiple input instances are needed to complete the business transaction, and each input instance has its own separate application processing path. For example, on the first screen, the user might type in an account number, hit enter, application processing takes place, and a screen is returned. This is the application processing path for the first input instance. Then on this return screen, the user might type in a purchase order number, hit enter, application processing takes place, and another screen is returned. This is the application processing path for the second input instance, and so on. When all input instances for the order entry business transaction have been entered, this order entry business transaction is complete. So what we really need to determine is the application processing path that was followed for each input instance in the order entry business transaction. What do we need to know for each input instance? Specifically, for each input instance, we need to know the input data that was passed to the initial program, the sequence in which each program was called, and the call statements made to files in each program. This should include where they occurred in each program and the data variables they used. We also need the data, if any, that was passed to each program when it was called and the data that was finally sent back to the user screen for this input instance. This is the essential information we need to know on the application processing path for each input instance. From this base data, we could then construct meaningful program-to-file CRUD matrices, CRUD meaning creates, reads, updates, and deletes. And knowing the application processing paths would allow us to know where to make changes safely without adversely affecting anything else and thus be able to provide effective support. But how do we determine the application processing paths for the order entry business transaction? Finding application processing path information is a daunting task. It is daunting if we only have program source code and file definitions. We would have to start by flowcharting what we feel are pertinent programs in each input instance, then try to play computer to identify the processing paths they follow and attempt to find which files they access, then try to make a representative program file CRUD matrix, and so on. We conclude that this manual approach would take far too long, typically with best guess results, so we feel that this is not a very attractive alternative. Are there any tools that can help? Yes, there is a tool called PathPoint from PathPoint Software that does just this. PathPoint is business transaction oriented and will automatically capture the input instance application processing paths and CRUD matrix information for the business transaction you enter as they execute on the mainframe. This is a very attractive alternative since it typically takes about 30 minutes to capture application processing path information and load the captured results into the PathPoint PC component. And the captured information is accurate since this is exactly what the app did when it executed these business transactions. How do I use PathPoint? All you have to do is to enter the online business transactions you care about and let PathPoint automatically capture the application processing path information for each input instance as it executes on the mainframe. The captured information is then loaded into a relational database in the PathPoint PC component where you can see, with a simple point and click, how the application actually processed each input instance for each business transaction. And since this information is in a relational platform, program file CRUD matrix displays and reports can be easily generated. This can be done at the individual input instance level or at a business transaction level. Because of this, design questions can be answered quickly, like which programs updated this file and where in each program did the file update occur. This means that when change requests arrive, like add a new function to the order entry business transaction, we can now simply capture the application processing path for this transaction and start at the design phase almost immediately using the captured information in the PathPoint PC component to dramatically improve our understanding of the application to implement these changes safely. How do I get started with PathPoint? The easiest way to get started is to use the Quick Start offering, as it includes the PathPoint software, education, and support for the first year. For a $50K charge, you get the whole package: software, education, and support for 1 year. After the first year, you have the option to buy the software outright with a yearly maintenance option. Please contact us for more information. I am Joe Gulla, jgulla at pathpointsoftware.com, and I can give you more information on the PathPoint Quick Start. We're on the web at www.pathpointquickstart.com. We're also on Facebook. Our short name is PathPoint Software. We are confident that PathPoint Software can help you address the challenges of maintaining legacy mainframe applications.